Oh, good. Hi, everybody. We are live. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 group. And I'm here with Russ Vitale, our college concierge we've been working with for a while, who runs our concierge services. So I'm going to give people a chance to sign in, log on, watch, settle in. I see the numbers of viewers, increasing. So, as soon as you can, just put something in the comments. Tell us that you're there. You can hear us, where you're from. I would assume most of the people watching tonight have a high school senior, and also, but just confirm that if you have a high school junior or sophomore, that's great too. This is going to be good information for you. And, tell us how many kids you have too. Some people we've been running into have twins and triplets. So, I feel for you guys.
Hard enough with one, never mind 2 and 3.
Exactly. So again, while people are kind of signing on, Russ, I'd love for you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit more, give a little bit more background on how long you've been doing this type of work.
Yep. Okay, so I'm Russ Vitale, and I've been a college admissions advisor and counselor now, coach for, this is my 16th season, which is hard to believe. I'm located in New Jersey, but I work with people all over the country on various aspects of the process. You can kind of see over my shoulder there. I'm also a author of a book called College Making the Complicated Easy. Actually been selling a lot of those books actually recently, Deb. I think a lot of last minute people are
good
looking for a silver bullet, maybe. I also, though, perhaps most importantly, is I actually have a high school senior daughter as well. So now, after helping so many families for so long and loving it, by the way, helping my own daughter at this point too. So I am very invested, as I always have been for my clients, but now even to another level. So I'm going through exactly all the same stuff as testing and change in process and all that, and all the frustrations that everybody else is going through as well.
Yeah, and I didn't mention, but Russ alluded, I have a high school senior too. We spent the afternoon kind of like reviewing essays, so we're both going through exactly what everybody who's watching tonight is going through. So I see a ton of people signing on. That's great. I did even see some people who said they had twins, so my heart goes out to you. And so let me just tell you what we're going to go through tonight. We did actually go through in a Zoom session like about a week ago, but so many people, either couldn't be there live, although we sent the link to review it. So we just thought there was so much interest, we would do a Facebook Live on it as well. Give you guys a second chance to ask questions, and just continue to share the information. So I'm going to share a presentation, and I will, manage and look at the comments. If you guys, whatever questions you have, we will try and get to as many of them as possible. And we put together kind of, the issues that families with high school seniors should be thinking about. It's a crazy year. We don't have to say that. We all know it. And we probably, none of us have been through an admissions cycle that's going to come in the next, 10 months or so. So we're all in it for the ride together. And we just thought we would highlight issues and share any information that we do know. So let me share and we'll get started. Okay, great. So I'm going to pass it off to you, Russ, and I will manage the slides and look at all the questions.
Okay, yes. Yeah, and please interrupt if there's anything appropriate and you want to have other conversation. It's interesting. We're kind of calling this now, what I've been referring to for a long time as the senior sprint, right? So, I actually start the process with my clients in May, believe it or not. And, there are a lot of clients that took me up on that and started working on things. Their Common App essay, even their Common App in general, obviously working on their list. And then there's other people that kind of say, well, I got it. And despite all my videos and emails and newsletters and all kinds of things I send them, they say, oh, we have plenty of time. And now we don't have plenty of time anymore. Right. So a lot of people are starting to feel a little bit of pressure a little bit of anxiety about the process, or maybe more than what they felt before. So one of the reasons why we wanted to put this together is we wanted to try to hopefully help you to alleviate some of that anxiety and stress, give you some ideas and some information to try to help you cope and deal with it, but also to kind of let you know that now is the time that we can't make excuses anymore. For a lot of people, school's back in session and or will be very shortly. And we kind of have to get moving. And I'm not sure, hopefully you will, but I'm not sure everybody's going to get the help or assistance or guidance that they were hoping for from their high schools.
Okay.
So basically what we wanted to talk about today is, your college list. I've said this over and over and over again. And anybody who's followed and listened to any of the things that we've done, it's in my book as well, but the list drives everything. And it sounds obvious, but the college list is what's going to drive affordability, admissibility, and the process as far as essays, applications, early action, early decision, all those kind of things. So it's really important to make sure that you're putting the list together using your admission goals, but also your financial goals as you do that. In addition, we all know the busy work, the heavy work, it's not quite the fun stuff, but the essays need to take.
Sorry.
Okay. So the essays are really critical and really key. And I find most of the time for seniors, it's just tough to get them nudged and moving in the right direction. Once they go, they're usually okay. But especially, a lot of your creative thinkers, a lot of people that are looking at selective schools, or people who honestly just don't even like to write, which that does happen. There are some people like that. Getting them started is the tough thing. But there's a specific way. And I think this year, more than ever, Deb, I really think that the essays and the supplements, I've always treated it as a deal maker or deal breaker in my process. But I think this year with SAT optional schools and all those other things that are going on, I really think the essays are more important than they ever have been. Because it's the one opportunity when you're taking a major admission criteria away of SATs or ACTs, it's the one criteria that you can actually learn the most about the students. Applications, Common App, Coalition App, college-specific app, which ones do you do? How do you decide? Those kind of things. But, that's a lot of the busy work stuff, but it's also sometimes strategic as to how you answer the questions and what kind of responses you put in there. And then obviously the idea is you want to get ready to submit. And do you want to submit early action, early decision, rolling, honors programs, all those kind of things. So that's kind of the focus of what we want to discuss today, because at this point, class choices and activities and all those other things they're already done. Not that you can't change them a little bit, but the issue really now is getting the work done. So, is your list realistic? We have the Build Your Perfect College List program. We have a college list navigator service that we have, but what are you doing to establish the criteria for you, your student, and your family to make sure that the college list represents the admission goals, the application goals, and the financial goals that you are looking for you and your family? Also, again, don't have to tell you, just this weekend, tons of tests have been canceled. Depends obviously on where you live, but a lot of tests have been canceled. Sometimes some schools are talking about potentially trying to reschedule them, host them themselves. But should you try to take them? Should you stress about it? I kind of advised my students back, long time ago in late May to stop all tutoring and testing, because I had a good feeling that the testing was going to continue to be canceled, and I didn't want them to waste their time, effort, and money doing so. Majority of people did take me up on it, and unfortunately, I was right. Most of the tests have been canceled, at least in the Northeast. That's been the case. I'd love to hear about some of the other folks that are on this call. Test optional is definitely something that I have seen most schools, not all, but most schools announce that they're going to go test optional. But you really need to understand, what does that mean? If you have a test score, should you submit it? And if you don't, does that mean the school is actually going to be easier to get into? What happens when one major criteria is taken away from the application and admission process? There's a lot of other things, and what happens as far as money and merit and honors and all those kind of things. As I said before, essays are more critical than ever. And the supplements also are very, very important. And I have to tell you, I'm in essay heaven myself today. I started at 10 o'clock this morning and just finished right before this call because it's the busy season, and I have to tell you, kids are really having a tough time with their main essay, but more with the supplements, the generic things that they say and the way they respond. Is just not going to cut it. It never would, but especially now, I don't think it's going to cut it. So a lot of students are struggling with that, especially the why this school essay. And then also, Debbie, we talked about this a lot, but, with colleges struggling and, potentially having some major financial hits, I think early decision is going to be more and more important this year than ever.
Yes.
I think more schools are going to add early decision. They're going to extend early decision dates. They may even add early decision too. So I really think early decision is going to be very, very key, even more than it has been. As well as potentially your early action. But it's really important to have the right admission strategy and make sure that you're, again, putting your child in the best position for acceptance, but also that you're considering all the potential financial impacts of making those decisions as well. And then the last thing, which a lot of people have been talking about, is I'm sure everybody's aware that there's a new COVID essay. And the question is really, do you need to write that? What do you write if you do? And all those kind of things.
So, Russ, I know we're going to get to some of these in more detail, but let me just ask 1 or 2 questions because I feel like I'm going to lose them. You know what I mean? As there's so many questions coming through. So Trisha asked, and actually somebody else submitted this question earlier, so I think it's a good one. Should you submit an essay to schools that actually say essay optional? So we got test optional, and then there's some of the schools say essay optional on the Common App. Like, what do you think that are they really essay optional?
Yeah, so I speak with my students and my clients all the time, and in my opinion, optional is not optional. Okay, and I actually know I've obviously over the 16 years I've gotten to know, met with, and still have relationships with a lot of admissions people. And one of the first things that they'll tell me is that if the student was not willing to write the optional essay, that they're not even entertaining their application. It doesn't matter what their GPA is. It doesn't matter what their statistics are. They do not want, you can't be that interested in my school if you weren't willing to write the optional essay. So always, always, always write the optional essay. The other thing is, we talked about college-specific applications. There's a lot of marketing ploys going out there right now. Remember, U.S. World News Report is not based on anything other than, at least initially, number of applications, not qualified applications that a school receives. So a lot of schools might say, okay, you don't have to write an essay if you apply to us right now. And I don't necessarily think that that's a good idea. If the school is a safety for your child, then maybe. But I actually, again, especially if you don't have standardized testing results to share, I really think that the more the student can share and express who they are, what they're about, what's important to them, and how they'd fit into the college community, the better.
There's another question here. And this I actually... myself was not completely aware of until about a week ago. And I don't know how much you've gotten exposed to this, Russ, but there's some schools on the Common App that are asking whether you are, even if you don't have a score now, are you planning to take the tests? And they want to know, as you're submitting the application now, do you still plan to take the test in the future, and will you submit those scores?
Yeah. So, again, I think the answer, honestly, is it depends. In an ideal world, I think most students would like to probably try to take a test. But again, it's an uncertain world that we're in, and you don't know if it's going to happen. So I think that's a little bit of a strategic question. I think that you would want to say yes in most cases, that yes, you intend or would like to, because I've actually seen a little bit of the opposite. I did see that on a couple of schools, Debbie, but I actually saw, do you intend to submit your scores? Yes, no. And then there's a drop-down box after that says, is it a result of you not being able to take the test? So whatever. So in that instance, that's a no-brainer. You should obviously fill that out. But I would have to think in most instances, unless you know your child is really struggling with the test, I would say in most instances, I would say yes.
Okay. Okay, let's go on. I think a lot of the questions are going to be that you've asked, we're going to get to. So And we do have a lot, so we're going to try and go through, we don't want
to keep you here tonight. Oh, even though Yellowstone is no longer, the whole summation of the season was last week, so I'm not missing that tonight. So. But anyway, so, and for those of you who've attended other things, you know how much I love Yellowstone. So that was a little joke. But anyway, so the COVID essays. So it is new in the writing section of the Common App. And remember, there's two. There's one for the student to write, which is 250 words. And there's one for this high school or guidance to write, which is, I believe, 500 words. Not all students, though, should respond to that question, because you have to remember, you have to keep it in perspective. If you actually look at and read the wording of the question, it is really looking to address major significant impacts that have happened with your child or with your family as a result of COVID. I hope that all of you are safe, healthy, and yes, inconvenienced and not majorly impacted. But if you are majorly impacted, and what I mean by that is, major health concerns, maybe a loss of income, something significant that's happened to your lifestyle as a result. That's really what they're looking for. I've had a lot of students, not so much now, but in the beginning, ask, well, I wasn't able to do this internship over the summer. Should I write about that? I didn't get to go to prom, and I didn't get to participate in my spring season. And believe me, neither did my daughter. And she's very upset about it. It's disappointing. It's heart-wrenching for all of us. But that's not what that essay is about. It's really supposed to be about one of two things. Either you are significantly impacted, and the key with that is significantly impacted. And again, if you don't have a significant impact, then God bless you, and don't be afraid that you're omitting that section, okay? This is an instance where the optional essay is actually optional, and that's a good thing, okay? Because you can also hurt yourself tremendously by putting the wrong type of response in there. So you don't want to appear insensitive. You don't want to appear selfish. You don't want to appear unaware of what's going on in the world and how much this has really truly impacted a lot of families out there. So again, you really want to think as to whether or not you should answer that. And I think actually most students probably should not. The other thing that I said, because I said there are two ways. If your child has had some major significant impact positively during this whole thing, helped essential workers, done something, significantly in the community to help and support them, then at that point, again, it depends on what it is, but you might want to consider putting a response in there, not from a bragging way, but from a real heartfelt, compassion, empathetic tone, but you could consider that. The other thing is the high school, as I said, also has the ability to provide their own COVID statement. And I think, and Debbie, we've talked about this quite a bit. I think you absolutely should be asking your high school to see what their COVID statement is going to be, because it is going to be part of your child's application. And what would they talk about there? They could talk about the fact that they've gone pass fail. They could talk about the fact that they are virtual, that there were connectivity or technical issues. They can talk about how they handled calculating GPA and final grades. There's a whole bunch of things that they could talk about. And similar to your school's high school profile that I would insist that you see before they submit it, I think you are very much entitled to the COVID statement. I will tell you, I've asked my daughter's high school 3 times so far, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. They still don't. So I don't know if that's a sign that they're not going to write anything, or if they're just saying that to me right now and don't want to share the actual response that they're going to have. So I don't know, what to do with that myself, but I think you should at least ask. I think you should press, because again, you should know everything that gets submitted with your child's application.
Right. So just to reiterate, so that's 2 things, because it was kind of mentioned lightly, but there is the school profile, which you should, see a copy of. And when you're asking for that, ask what they're writing for the school specific COVID essay.
Right. Right. A lot of people aren't even aware that the high school profile gets submitted.
That's why I wanted to emphasize it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, that's really important. Every school has a profile that they submit to colleges that explains the level of rigor at their school and other different things, cost offerings and size and all those kind of things.
So here, Kathy is asking, what if the student was an essential worker? So I assume that they, helped out in some very important way. And should that be the part of
Yeah,
the
I mean, in that instance, yes, I would say yes. I would probably, and again, hopefully the impact or influence was significant. But again, the only thing I will just caveat that to is just watch the tone of that. You don't want to have it too braggadocious, and you want to do it definitely from an empathetic way, and back it up. It's just like all the essays. We're going to talk about that in a second, but all the essays should be in the tone of showing, not telling. Have information and experience to back that up.
And Celeste is asking, who at the high school do you ask about the COVID?
Yeah, I would start with guidance. You definitely start with the guidance department. And if you don't get a response there, I went to the principal when I didn't get a response there, and he didn't know about it either. So that's a little scary. But yes, I would start with guidance. And if you don't get the response you want, I would go to the principal, and hopefully you have better luck than me so far. Okay. So step one is really, again, finalizing your child's college list, or your college list if you're a student listening. And listen, the list is actually, more challenging for a lot of people than they understand, and then they lead on. A lot of times the list is put together based on emotion. And I totally understand it's a very emotional process, but a lot of it is kind of misguided emotion. So I have this thing that I called, and I talk about it in my book, but we talk about it all the time, is, what I call bumper sticker envy. Listen, everybody should have reaches on their schools, reaches on their list. Okay. Doesn't matter if your student is a 2.7 or a 4.7. Everybody should have some reaches on their list, so there's no regrets in the process, and they get into the quote unquote best school possible for them, right? But at the same time, make sure that it's not just an academic reach. Make sure that you understand if financing is a concern, that if it's a financial reach as well, because then you can get into the mix of having your student get in, but now you're not going to be able to send your child because it's not within your budget. And Debbie, we talk about this every year, but I think that's probably the number one post that we get come March, April, May, is that I can't believe my child got into her dream school or his dream school, and they gave me no money and I can't afford it. So you can avoid that process, or at least go in eyes wide open. Right. And understand and have the discussion with your child and say, listen, you can apply wherever you want, but if they don't come back with financing that works within our budget, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to attend.
And in addition to that conversation, make sure there's at least one or two schools on that list that you can afford, or come close to affording, and your child will say, yes, I will go to those if the other schools don't work out financially.
Absolutely. So, and that's the right mix of reach, matches, and safeties, right? So, a lot of people ask me this, and hopefully I'll head it off at the pass, okay? But I always recommend 2 reaches, 6 matches, and 2 safeties. That's just a generalization. It's not specific to your child, but if you do it that way, you should be very safe. Okay. Now, if finance is not a concern, you can absolutely weigh more on the reach part if you would like. If your child is looking for, more selective schools, you can definitely do more on the reach category, because that's very subjective and you're not sure how that's going to plan out and all those kind of things. But to Debbie's point, you want to make sure first that you have the worst case scenario set up for your child as a good one, not a last resort. And what I mean by that is, I can't tell you how many families come to me very late in the process wanting me to try to fix or reverse decisions that were made. And I obviously can't do that, saying, well, I don't know, he or she applied to all these top end schools and now didn't get into them. And now he or she's going to the state school where he or she had no desire to go. And it's not to beg or to put down the state school, but there's a lot in between their selective schools and the state schools. So you need to find those, you need to look at those, and don't go just on ratings and rankings and prestige, perspective of a bumper sticker, because as we've always said, you have to make sure a school is the right match from an academic, financial, and non-academic perspective, meaning social, to make sure your child is in an environment where they can thrive, not just survive. And there's a lot of great schools out there. So you have to make sure that you understand what the affordability, what the admission, how admissions have been impacted as a result, how honors is now going to be considered, how merit is now going to be considered if they go SAT optional. I've been having my students make a lot of phone calls and do a lot of emails to try to understand that. And you and your child should be doing that as well.
Well, that was an earlier question, Russ, about, with schools going test optional, how are they going to evaluate who to offer merit scholarships to? Because a lot of schools in the past use GPA and test scores as kind of the defining information.
Yeah, a lot of times test scores are the secondary, but typically it is GPA, rigor of classes taken. And, the other thing I'll tell you is that especially if you are going to go now maybe SAT optional, but your child has a very strong GPA, they should be saying yes to every honors program that they can get into. And yes, it might be a little bit more work for them, but why not? If you're taking out the ACT, SAT, and you don't have that, but you have a very strong GPA, and some of you might be actually a godsend, because some of you have said to us all the time, my student is a great student, but really has some challenges and some difficulty with testing. If they take that off the table, I would definitely, I'm actually having a lot more of my students apply for honors classes honors programs, because why not? You have nothing to lose.
Okay, great question by Kara. We get this a lot, but I think we should address it. Should our children be emailing admissions offices with questions? Will they be inundated?
Yeah, so I also always so I was thinking that we were going a different way, but other than finance, your child should be doing all the communications with the colleges that they're considering. Email, phone calls, whatever that may be. Okay. Finance is the only thing that a parent can take the lead on, and I just had that conversation twice today. I think it's totally unrealistic to think that a student is going to be able to answer financial aid questions and understand how much your family makes and all those kind of things. That's totally absurd. But so other than finance, the student should take the lead. And yes, a lot of them want to email, but I have to tell you, I always tell my students, this is not a Snapchat and TikTok machine. This is a phone. Okay. So make the phone call and get somebody live and ask the question. Don't worry about the impression that you're going to make or asking a silly question. Don't worry about that. When in doubt, I sent 4 emails and nobody responded. Okay. Make the phone call. And I do think, especially right now, I would make the phone call. Maybe even ahead of the email communications, unless you already have an existing relationship with them.
Right. And they may be inundated. We don't know. But honestly, that's their job. And as Russ is kind of suggesting, if you email and you don't get an answer, then call. I would just try all the different ways, because, I think when you get through, they will be happy to answer the question. But, you do have to maybe be a little persistent to get through.
Yeah. And I think, yes, I think also it's going to depend on the school, right? The bigger schools, they just have inundated with volume, and maybe the people, maybe not enough resources. It's one of those things when you call customer service and they say, sorry, all our representatives are busy. They're not busy. It's because you have 2 on and you should really have 15 on. It's not, it's really that, but so you have to experience that and expect that a little bit, be persistent, and make sure you get the answers that you want.
Okay, one last question, then we'll move on.
Sure.
Alexis is asking, what questions should be asked, because most things can be found online? Yes and no. Not everything is online. Yeah,
well, also there's a couple things with that. First off, at least from what I've seen, I have not seen any colleges announce what their new policy is regarding honors or merit online.
Yep, exactly.
I haven't seen that. They may say that, yes, now we're SAT optional, but I have not seen how they're going to determine merit or honors program consideration. The other thing is, it really does depend on what your source is for the online information as well. So again, even when we teach people on Build Your Perfect College List program and other things that we do, and we teach people, we always say to validate and confirm by contacting the school directly. You don't, the internet is a great thing, but I like that to start, but I never, ever make any decisions in my life based on my research on the internet alone. I want to get it confirmed by the source.
And again, I'll go back to, the fact that Russ and I both have seniors. And I know my son has said to me, boy, these college websites are not that good. Like, he's had a hard time finding answers. It might be there, but he's digging and digging. And then if he finds it, it's not really clear. So it's nothing
A lot
wrong
of
with it.
times.
Yeah.
And especially regarding honors and merit, a lot of schools have gone away from being very specific there. They don't want to be pigeonholed into, if you have this kind of GPA and you take this many APs, you're automatically, especially now when they have to watch every dime, they want the subjectivity aspect. And I really just think it's better to try to make the phone call and validate anything you see online. So we talked about essays, right? So I have to tell you, there's two things that probably are the biggest mistakes that I see students make when it comes to essays. One is they don't answer the question in its entirety. Now, the prompt is very key because that directs you and drives how your child's supposed to respond. But if there's 3 parts to the question, they have to answer all 3 parts. And specifically answer, not it's in there inherently, and the admissions person needs to disseminate that. Because what happens is you have to understand your audience. You'd like to think that your child submits an application, an essay, and the admission person says, oh, wow, I have Lynn Lugo's application here, and I can't wait to listen to this and read this. That's not how it goes. Again, they don't have the resources. It's nothing personal. They just don't have the time to do it. They're sitting there with a stack this high of essay after essay after essay. You have to make their job easy. Answer the question in its entirety. Give them the response up front so they don't have to look and dig for it. Make it easier for them. And then the second biggest mistake, and there's a lot of different ones we can probably do, and we have in the past done a whole session on just the essay process, right, Deb? So we've done that before, but is telling and not showing. They tell, I'm responsible, I'm compassionate, I'm empathetic, I'm this, I'm that, but not showing. If you are that type of a person, you should be able to have information behind it with your experience, with what you've done and been involved in, with your thoughts, with how you handle yourself and conduct yourself on a daily basis. You should be able to show whatever claims you're making and back it up. And that's what the supplemental essays, as well as the Common App essay itself. In addition, a lot of my students, especially the first draft, they are very comfortable writing about other stuff and other people, but not so much about them. So what they'll end up doing is they'll write their first draft of their Common App essay. And you know what I do? After I start scanning through it a little bit, I go to the conclusion. Because the conclusion is where they actually start opening up and answering about them, but they kind of do it in summary and really quick. And okay, hopefully nobody really read that and they read the rest. But that's where I start, right? Because a lot of times, because students need to understand that, you need to write the essay in a way that is your opportunity, your students' opportunity to share, convey what they're about, how they'd be a good part of the community, and how they're different from every other student that they're considering. So it's very important to be specific about the student. Cliche topics is another thing. And sometimes I get pushback on this, and I understand when people say this. However, again, you're free to do what you want, but you have to be very careful about the sports essay, the camp essay, the injury essay. And please understand, I am not diminishing the significance of that in a student's life, but you have to understand there are so many people that write the same kinds of essays. And again, think about your audience. There was a survey done not so long ago, Debbie, that it was determined that admissions people take 4 seconds to decide if they're going to read or scan an essay. And again, they have this stack really high of essays, and they instantly go, oh, another athletic one. Oh, another injury one. Oh, another. You want to avoid that at all costs. Even if the message inside the essay is fantastic, you have to be careful not to lead with a cliche topic, because that is going to read scan all over it by the admissions person, and they're not going to spend the time to read your child's essay despite all the time and effort that they put into it. Optional, we talked about this before. Optional is not optional except for the COVID essay. So just do it. And then the supplemental essay. The tone is different for the supplemental essay unless it is a creative by nature type of essay topic. But, the Common App is not an English paper. It is not something that needs an anecdote. It is not something that needs a thesis. It is something you have freedom to write as you wish. But the supplemental essay should not be filled with fluff. It should be direct, to the point, and especially if you have only 200, 250 words, you don't have time for that anyway. So the tone is completely different for a supplemental essay.
Okay.
Any questions about that, Deb?
Oh, yes. Anne is asking, would an essay about my son's Eagle project be a good topic?
First off, Eagle Scout is great. And I love that, as well as the, gold award, silver award for the women as well. Girl Scouts, you just got to be careful. Again, it can be a great topic, but I don't know if I would lead with that. I would try to probably lead a little bit with what the learnings are first. Because again, it's not as popular as the sports essay, but there's a lot of kids that, and they should, and I understand they're very proud of their achievement, and they should be. It's a lot of effort. There's a lot of years that went into that. So I totally get that, but I think you need to be very careful. I probably wouldn't lead with that. I would probably have that within the essay somewhere. I would lead with the learnings or what you want the main point to be first.
Russ, so there's another question, and I can't remember when we're going to get to the testing. So I'm just going to ask it now because I feel like I might lose it in the discussion.
Yeah, sure.
But, and this hasn't come up a lot. So I don't know. We've never really addressed homeschool students. But this person is asking, in the past, SATs and ACTs have been a way for homeschool students to validate their grades. So are there different policies that are happening now for homeschool students in terms of test optionals? And, what if they truly can't get to a testing facility as well?
Yeah. So again, I have to tell you, I haven't worked with any, and I believe it or not, in 16 years, I haven't worked with any homeschool. So I don't want to give an opinion on that, I'm not educated on. I do think that, again, anybody who's affected by not being able to take a test, I mean, that's everybody. I don't though know, Debbie. I know that you've brought other people to the table on different things. I'm
going to say the same thing. I don't know a ton about the homeschool, but I do know that schools that are saying that they are test optional, they may not also be test optional for homeschool. So you have to double check.
Right.
That, so, you can't.
The other thing too is, Devin, again, we could do a whole thing on that if I was to educate myself on it, which I'm not right now. But my understanding is homeschool has a whole separate set of criteria and validation certificating, whatever you want to call it. So I'm just not, unfortunately, I'm not as well versed with that to respond. And I don't want to give bad advice.
Okay, well, one more essay question.
Sure.
So Paul is asking, my son's a 2-time cancer survivor. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad that he's
God bless.
Yep. Is this considered a cliche essay response?
Again, I don't want to be unfeeling or seem insensitive. No, it's not. But again, I wouldn't lead with that. Okay. Because again, you have to, again, remember your audience. So I'm sure that is a very significant, and listen, I've been hit, and I could probably relate with your child more than you even could imagine. So I understand the significance of it, but I would lead with the learnings, not with the fact that, and by the way, I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and not to be insensitive about it. But again, and it's not that admissions people, they're not jerks. I'm not saying that they're jerks. I'm not saying that they're not interested, but it's just, again, you reach a point after reading 50 essays that you just want to get through it. And they kind of do get to a point where they kind of, like I said, they look for ways to classify or bucket essays. And something where I'm sure your child has such a fantastic, strong, impressive message to share, you want to lead with whatever that message is in the opening paragraph. And yes, you can definitely address the fact that it is, as a result of having cancer twice and overcoming that, and what a superstar they are as a result. So I'm not saying you shouldn't mention it at all, but I just probably wouldn't lead with it. It's all about the packaging.
Okay, one last question, then move on. And this hasn't come up, and we haven't talked that much about it, Russ, about Zemi.
Yes.
So I've heard a little bit about this year, so I don't know if you have heard anything.
Well, it's become more and more popular. I think probably the last 3-4 years. I would say. Yeah, I have to tell you personally, I've advised my students not to do that, just because there are some ways that more is better than less, and then there's some ways that less is better than more. So, I mean, I have really, most of my students don't participate in that and do that. I don't know what you've learned about it, Debbie, but I just think that sometimes that can be opening a can of worms that could do you a disservice.
No, what I have heard, and for anybody who doesn't know, Zemi is a way for your student to upload a video, to supplement their application. I heard this year that there were fewer colleges either asking for it or allowing it. So it had been popular, but I don't think this year it seems to have died down a bit.
Yeah, and I think they opened up a can of worms. They probably said, we probably shouldn't have asked for this.
Right. That's why they're backtracking.
You'd be surprised what people write about, never mind do a video about. Polishing the Common App and other apps. Again, not writing about cliche topics or topics that are not well received. Remember that the answer to the questions does reflect on you as a student, and what you'll bring to the community. So take the time to do your homework. When people say, well, I don't know what I like about that school. I don't know what's special about that. I don't know why I'm applying there. Well, I'm sorry, but you should know why you're applying there. So, that's not an unreasonable question. I would say that's probably the most popular question is why this major, or why are you interested in this school? And a lot of students just don't want to do the homework and don't want to do the research, or they pull out some generic thing from the website and just put it in there that has no reflection on anything that they've done or any experiences that they've had. So take the time to do them the right way. The activity section is an opportunity to shine, assuming that they get to it. Okay, so and again, I do think there might be a little bit more scrutiny on that this year. And by the way, if your child intended to participate in an event or an activity in 12th grade or even over the summer and was not able to do it or participate in it due to COVID, do not put it on the application. For people who are concerned about where to put activities that were lost, you don't put it in the COVID essay, but you can absolutely still put it in the activity section, and you can say, unfortunately, canceled due to COVID. But that's not your child's fault. They didn't lose that internship because they were incompetent or because of something. They lost it because it was no longer available due to the pandemic. So you can still pose and put those things in the activity list. And if you have an activity that your child's done 9th, 10th, and maybe half of 11th grade and 12th grade, put it in 11th and 12th because their intention was still to do it. Now, you can't make up things, or you shouldn't, okay? But if it's consistent with what they're already involved in, you can definitely still check the boxes. Also, again, do you use the universal or college-specific apps? I think, a lot of times you should use the Common App or the Coalition application, especially if the college-specific app does not include an essay. As I said before, I think you want to provide more information versus less. But when in doubt, you can always ask the college and call directly to get their advice or suggestions on that. Letters of recommendation are a big thing that so many families and students spend so much more time on than they really should. Now, again, this year, there might be a little bit more life breathed into this, letter of recommendation this year because of no SATs or ACTs. But I mean, the trend has been for the longest time that it used to be 1 from guidance and 2 from teachers, so a total of 3. Now, so many schools are making letters of recommendation optional or asking for just 1 because they know that they don't get a lot of great information from these letters of recommendation. Teachers also hate doing it because they have a lot of people to write for. And after you write 10, how creative can you be with it? And they're obviously not going to agree to write a letter of recommendation and say, this child is terrible, you should not admit them. So, the value to a college of a letter of recommendation a lot of times is very negligible. So I don't know. This year it could be a little bit more, emphasis on that potentially, but don't stress over that. Don't worry about the STEM and the humanities. In an ideal world, yes, that would be nice. You have 1 STEM teacher, you have 1 humanities teacher. Ideally, both from 11th grade. But it depends on a lot of different things. So I usually don't like to go back further than sophomore year unless your students can have them freshman year and senior year. So try to keep it a junior year teacher or a sophomore year teacher, definitely in a core class. And what I mean by core class, math, English, science, history, language, not from a coach, not from an elective. So in an ideal world, that's how you'd like to do it. Now, there's exceptions to every rule and all those kind of things, and that's fine. But it's usually 2 teachers and guidance. Fill out brag sheets. Ask if your teacher needs any additional information from you to make it easy for them to write. And you submit what the college is asking for. But I do think that slowly but surely, the letters of recommendation are eventually going to be a thing of the past. Picking a major can absolutely impact your child's admission results, and that's really important. Picking engineering or the school of business or the school of engineering or the school of architecture or whatever is definitely has a lot of potential to impact the ability for your students to have more strict criteria to get admitted. So think about that very strongly. Do not be afraid to apply undecided. The last numbers, I don't know, Debbie, have you done anything on this recently? But the last numbers I saw was 68% of students apply undecided. And then the next part I saw was of the 32% that do apply saying, yes, I'd like this major. Apparently, after they go into college, 81% of them change their major at least once freshman year.
No, the changing of majors is a very high percentage.
And by the way, what 17, 18-year-old knows what they want to do the rest of their lives, right? Especially without taking the classes. A lot of us.
I'm going to tie this back. Somebody asked earlier, like what type of questions to ask the admissions office. Yeah. This is actually an important question. If your child is picking a particular major, and they end up not really wanting to do it once they kind of get involved, is A, how difficult is it to change the major? Because sometimes the major is specific to this particular school if the college has individual schools. So if that means that they want to transfer to a different school within the college, is that possible? So those are the types of questions you can ask.
Absolutely.
Okay. A question, I'm just going to generalize it, but it's about maybe related to COVID, and kids had more time and they might have taken some online classes that weren't related to their particular schoolwork. Maybe they took some coding classes. Should they include that on the activities list? And if they took multiple, should they just kind of lump that together, under one additional activity?
Yeah. So the answer again is it depends. I mean, so, if your child has already, remember, you're allowed to put up to 10 activities in the common application. And I believe it's the same for the coalition application. So it depends on how many activities your child has. If you're already pushing the limit, then by all means, you can combine them. And in the description, you can list the individual classes, because you don't need to say took an online class and got a great, don't worry about that. Everybody knows what an online class is, give or take. Okay. So you don't need to worry about that kind of a description. So in the description, you could combine and say, took a computer science class, took an economics class, took a whatever. You absolutely can do that. And that's probably the better place to do that, unless you got college credits for it, which that's part of under the education section. There is a way to, a specific segment for that where you can answer that.
And then what about summer jobs? Should they be included in the activities list?
Yeah, I think if your child was, first off, if it's a job they do every summer, then by all means they should. If it was a new job this summer, yes, I would put it in there and say, unfortunately, canceled due to COVID, just to show their intentions that they wanted to do that. Again, I'd be careful. Don't make it up. I mean, this is obviously the honesty policy, it's supposed to be. So I wouldn't make it up. But yeah, I mean, if that was an honest intention of your child, I would have no problem putting it in there, because it's, again, not the child's fault that it got, canceled.
A good question from Anne. It basically, is there a greater chance of being admitted if you elect undecided or over a competitive major?
Typically, yes. I mean, I can't across the board say that that's the case, but yes, but you have to understand what Debbie's point was before. Okay. So It may increase the potential for your child to get admitted to that school. However, their flexibility may be really, really short or small once your child's accepted to get into whatever that major is. So I'll give you an example, because this is just the biggest or most extreme example. If your child is thinking about becoming an engineering major and they want to apply to the engineering school of any college, most of the time that is a more selective major with higher requirements to get admitted. Now, can your child instead apply to the College of Arts and Sciences and choose physics as a major? Yes. However, that if they're accepted on those terms, that doesn't mean that once your child's there, they're just going to automatically be able to apply and get into the engineering school later on. That's not necessarily the case. Sometimes it's not the case at all. So you have to be careful about that. But in general, because I don't want to give bad advice here, I don't want everybody to say Russ Vitelli said go undecided. It does depend. But in general, usually, yes, undecided is a way to not put special requirements on your student for admission purposes.
Okay, one last question, then we'll move on. A question about what if you have fewer activities on the Common App, like fewer than 10, but the activities you're listing, and the reason why you were fewer is because they were more intensive and you did them for a much longer time.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think those are good too. I mean, for the most part, I do have some students that have a tough time, filling 10, or they kind of put some silly things in there, like they played softball in freshman year and that was it, and not that that's insignificant, but that's not going to help the college admission process in any way, shape, or form. But they want to show that they were active, that's okay. So yeah, I do believe that colleges want more, quality versus quantity. But in that instance too, depending on the involvement, I actually, in that instance, believe it or not, might actually do a resume. I discourage that most of the time, and colleges really don't want that most of the time. They kind of are most of them are trying to do away with that because it's more stuff to read that they don't want. But because remember, the activity section is a very, very short description too. You don't really get to say a whole heck of a lot. So if you feel like the description is not an accurate representation of all the time, effort, and accomplishments your child has had in a activity that they've been doing for a long time, you should definitely potentially consider submitting a resume.
Okay.
All right. So admission strategies matter, like we talked about. I do think early decision is going to be a big deal. But before I get into this, I saw a couple people in the comments already ask, can you explain the difference between, right? Everybody asks that question, right? Okay. So early decision, you can only apply to one early decision school at a time. And I'll explain what I mean by at a time in a minute. But early decision is where you apply and your child, you as the parent, and guidance all need to sign a contract saying that if your child is admitted, they will attend. You are committing to go to that school if you are accepted under early decision. Now, there is, everybody says, well, no, but I understand that, if financially it doesn't work out, you can drop out of that. Yes, technically that's true. However, think about it in this capacity. If you went to a restaurant that you could not afford and you ate the whole meal, including dessert, and then when the bill came, you decided, you know what, I can't really pay for this. You think you understand you'd probably be in pretty good trouble. Okay. You have to think about it the same way. Early decision is a commitment. It is supposed to help the colleges, what they call yield. They depend on you to be there, and they are very vindictive if you break it. That will hurt. And you may say it doesn't matter because you're your last child, but it can hurt the high school and future applicants to that school. It could even hurt I don't know how this always happens, but I always hear horror stories of somebody who's done that. And guess what? The admissions people end up finding where else the student applies. They call admissions and share with them the fact that this child applied early decision and reneged. It is, put it this way, it's not something you want. Okay, so I have two requirements for early decision that I give to the requirements to all my students. I'll share that with you. Number one is it has to be the top choice for your student, no matter where else they get accepted. Don't do it solely for admission purposes. Don't do it, well, I really would like to go to this school. That's my top choice. But if I apply early decision to this one, it might help my chances and might really put me over the edge. That is an admission strategy. That is something to consider, but only do that if you're not going to be disappointed by giving up the other school. So it should be your child's number one choice. Second is you have to be knowledgeable and become an educated consumer for college of how financial aid may work at that institution. You can get what they call a lot of times an early read. Sit with financial aid, sit with admissions, and understand what your child might be eligible for. Please understand they're not going to sign on the dotted line and give it to you as a contract and say, yes, we're committing to give you this, but it should at least open the conversation and give you a very, good feeling as to whether or not it's within your budget. So early decision is committing to go somewhere if you're accepted. Now, the reason I said you can only apply one school early decision at a time is because there are some schools, and I think this year, Debbie, there'll be more schools that add what they call early decision 2. So a lot of early decision schools, they have their decision day as October 15th, November 1st, November 15th, December 1st. But then there's other schools that have that, but then they also offer another round of early decision, January 1st, January 15th, February 1st. So what I mean by one at a time is your child can apply early decision to Wake Forest. God forbid they get deferred, waitlisted, which, by the way, that breaks the obligation for early decision. So now you're no longer committed. Or if they're outright rejected, they can apply to their second choice school, Emory University, as an example, early decision 2. So you can apply to 2 early decision schools if the first one doesn't work out, but only one at a time. Early action is no commitment whatsoever. Early action is your child's ability to submit their application early and get a response early so they don't have to wait until March or April to hear a decision and try to make a final decision as whether I should go there. Most of the time, if your child applies early action, there are a lot of dates, again, of October 15th, November 1st, and that kind of time frame. Typically, that means that you'll hear, and it depends on the school, but in the mid-December time frame. So that way, hopefully, your child can say, okay, I'm at least in college, I'm in a school that I really want to go to, and not have to stress throughout the rest of the process until the decision day, which is May 1st. There are some advantages of doing that. There are a lot of schools that take a big percentage of their students early action. You need to know that, need to understand that. But I always say that it does very much depend on the school as to whether or not that's a good strategy for you. But it also very much does depend on the match your child is to the school, because applying early action to a REACH school is not always in the best interest of the student. But again, it depends on the actual school and the student. Rolling admissions means that once the window opens to accept applications, you can apply whenever you think you're ready and you have the information that you want. And typically within 4 to 6 weeks, as long as they don't need any additional information, you can get an admission decision. And your child can go, yay, I'm going to college. So, rolling, there are some benefits to that. Again, and the biggest benefits, by the way, to all this early action, early decision rolling stuff is that, Debbie, I'm sure you probably, I see this on our Facebook page all the time, but so many students, unfortunately, don't get the information from their colleges, especially if they're waitlisted, deferred, or applied regular, until sometimes the middle of April.
Right.
Then they have 2 weeks to decide, okay, which of these 5 schools am I going to? You didn't work out financial aid. You didn't go visit an accepted student day. You don't know which one's really their fit, and now you panicked in 2 weeks. So there is, some place for rolling and early action type schools on everybody's list, just to try to alleviate some of that stress.
I mean, personally, I think it's like a no-brainer. If a school is offering early action or rolling, and and your child is thinking of applying early decision anywhere, or whatever, just that the school is offering early action and rolling, get it in as soon as possible. Yeah. Definitely get it in before early action.
Right, especially if your child's a good match for the school.
Mm-hmm.
The REACH sometimes can make it a little messier. But if it's a match or a safety for your child, by all means, apply early action, apply rolling, get that early response, know your worst case scenario is cared for, and then you can go, and believe me, you'll see your students' shoulders drop down tremendously after they get that one under their belt there. They feel good about that.
So Julie has a good question, which, I hadn't really thought about, but of course this year might be an issue.
Yep.
I'm assuming, so she's saying her 2020 grad's taking a gap year. So I'm assuming that your student did not apply this, he's not committed to a school. He or she is not committed to a school. So the question is, if they're going to, she is going to apply next year, can they apply early decision? And they may not have a counselor to sign.
Yeah, that is going to depend on the individual school. So I'm actually working with 2 students that are taking a gap year that just started with me. And both of them actually, when they called the schools, because I had them call the colleges that they're interested in, because, a lot of schools are changing their process and policies regarding gap years. So they were told that they could use the Common App. Now, one of my students is applying early decision somewhere, and they actually have to go back to their high school to get their a guidance person to actually sign off. So I think it does depend on the school. But if they accept the common application, I don't believe, and again, I'm not an expert on this, but I don't believe there's a way to bypass that. Now, you could potentially do it maybe with a school-specific application if they have one. That would be one way if they didn't have that requirement. But that's, again, whenever I am working, and I have to say it's been interesting that me educating myself, because as I told you, despite all the hype, in 16 years, I've never had a child or student take a gap year, despite all the hype that people have been talking about now. But, these are my first 2 that I've kind of gotten involved with. And it's been an interesting learning process. But thus far, I've just been telling and advising them to call the school specifically, ask the questions, and get their advice on how it's best to, apply.
Okay, so Russ, you touched off a lot of questions, so maybe we need to clarify. Several people are asking, if a school does offer early action, like why would that ever be a bad decision to apply early action?
So again, if the school is a match or a safety for your student, it wouldn't be. You should absolutely do that. But if the school is a reach for an academic reach for your student, it's a selective school, sometimes it might be better to actually apply regular admission to get first and second marking period grades under their belt and submit those to position your student more favorably, obviously assuming that they do well first and second marking period in rigorous classes. So I'm not saying that you wouldn't necessarily, but it does depend on the student, the match they are to the schools, and the specific schools that you're considering.
And Grace has a good question, and then we'll go on. Okay. If a lot of students right now only have GPA information and they don't have that test score, are they really able to determine if a school is a safety or reach or a match just with the GPA information?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to do that. One is, if put it this way, if you look at your GPA, and a lot of times, in different sources, there are ranges of GPAs for students that are accepted. You could also go to the college-specific website and look for the freshman profile, where there's a lot of schools provide some really great information in there as to how many average AP classes were taken, the average GPA weighted and unweighted, and all those kind of things. So I would look at those 2 sources. But really, at the end of the day, even though ACTs and SAT scores may not be applicable at the moment for a lot of us, the ranges still tell you if that school is a highly selective school or not. And as I've said before, just because they went SAT optional doesn't mean it's all of a sudden easier to get into that school. So if you are looking at the ranges and there are 1,400 is the lowest of the SAT, and 33 is the lowest of the ACT. I'm sorry, that's a reach. No matter what your GPA is, no matter how many APs or IB classes you've taken, it doesn't matter. So I wouldn't dismiss the ACT, SAT scores from a measuring reach match safety, even though you may not be able to get to submit them. So we had some questions last time. The AP versus dual enrollment is probably, I don't know if anybody is interested in that one today, but you know, AP classes are very, very important to show rigor. Again, not critical for all students, but if you're applying or thinking about applying to the more selective schools, AP classes are very important. And, you know, there's the options sometimes for taking an AP class or having what they call dual enrollment, where you're actually taking a course at or through a college. Both have their advantages and disadvantages. The only thing I will say, which is really the big difference here, in my opinion, is, you know, if you have to pay for the dual enrollment courses, I'd be very careful, because just because you get college credit does not mean that that college credit will be accepted at the schools your child is applying to and eventually gets accepted to. So I just be very careful about those. Does it show increased rigor on the student's transcript and on their application? Absolutely. But at that point, you might use it for application and admission purposes, not necessarily to lower the cost of college. And again, it very much depends on the school. Early decision and early action absolutely are some advantages. There are some schools that take a large number, and even the acceptance rates might vary tremendously. Do your homework there. There are, you know, a lot of sources to check those things out. But again, you have to be careful. Like, I'll give you an example. You know, Michigan, University of Michigan, University of Virginia are two schools historically that take a lot of their applicants from the early admission pool. Their reaches for almost every one of my students that apply, despite being great students. So in that instance, I would still advise them, even though Michigan deferred 98% of their early action students the last 2 years, even though some of my students got into Princeton and were, you know, deferred at Michigan for whatever reason. But those are schools that really, you know, I know really prefer the early application pool, the early admission pool. You know, so it does depend on the school, and that's what I said. I didn't want to just universally say this is how it needs to, you need to do what you should do in every instance for every school. So there are advantages. I think this year more than ever, I really think enrollment is something that students, colleges want to really get a good handle of, because they've been really taking a hit recently. Test optional, test prep, or sending current scores, that is a whole topic amongst itself. You know, it depends again on whether the school is a reach, match, or safety. Depends if you have a score or you do not. You know, the test prep thing I think is very tough. I think it depends on your state and depends on where you live and what you think the viability is of actually having a test versus it being canceled. A majority of my students, although I have students throughout the whole country, a majority of my students have told me that their tests have been canceled this weekend. So, and that's across the country. So I know there's exceptions, and somebody will probably say, no, my child sat in, and that's great. But, you know, I think you just want to be smart and efficient with the process and not spend a lot of time, effort, and money on something that might not happen. So again, it's a personal choice. And also, if your child has been struggling with the test, then I think it's a no-brainer. Do not, you know, have them struggle to get, you know, a 10-10 on a test, and nothing wrong with a 10-10. But when all the schools they're applying to require 1,400, like, why do it? You're just putting the child through agony, and there's no reason to. So I also think that's a very specific case-by-case decision. AP scores, send in or not, you know, you don't have to send them in, but you can self-report them on the Common Application if they're good. And what I mean by good is, you know, it depends again on the types of schools your student is applying to. I would never put anything or self-report anything less than a 3. And ideally, honestly, you probably want to report only 4s and 5s. Schedule interviews or wait to be contacted. You absolutely, especially in today's world, you don't wait to be contacted. Granted, they could tell you, you know, we don't do interviews until after you submit your application. We contact people randomly with alumni, and that's fine, but don't assume that. A lot more schools, Debbie, I don't know if you've seen this, but a lot more schools, because they know students cannot actual visit them,
They're doing a lot more interviews.
A lot more virtual Zoom sessions
Yep.
with my students in their colleges. So I would not wait in any way, shape, or form. Reach out and see if you can set schedules. So let's remember these things. The college list drives everything. Like I continue to say, you're going to hear that over and over again because we do want you to put the right time and effort into your criteria, but make sure that you're using, because it sets up your whole process for success or potentially for failure. Remember, the college essay is different from an English essay. And by the way, if your child has a great English teacher that they have a good relationship with and they really love, by all means, work with them. I'm not saying all English teachers are bad or any of those things. But I am saying is that it's you don't need, like I said before, an anecdote. You don't need a thesis statement. You can write it in the third person. You can use contractions. You can write it humorously. There's a lot of different things that you can do with it that, a traditional English paper or a history paper, would never be able to, say was okay. Supplemental essays are key, especially this year. Do your homework. If you visited, say you visited. If you haven't, but you've done a bunch of things online, share what you've done online to learn about the school, to do research, to participate in every way you can to show demonstrated interest. Early decision, early action, as we just said, can provide an admissions edge, but you have to go in informed. And then remember, ACT or SAT optional does not mean easier to be admitted. For some, it could be a godsend because of the struggle for testing. I personally, and Debbie and I kind of share this, and I don't want to speak for her, but we think the testing is a bit overrated. It's a big money grab in a lot of ways. I don't think most schools measure a student based on one test day. And I haven't seen any data that says that anybody that did better on an ACT or SAT versus somebody who didn't is more successful. So I haven't seen any ties with that. So I don't think the SAT optional thing is a bad thing. I actually think it could be more prevalent now as a result. But just remember that, a reach or more selective school is not going to become a whole lot less selective or, more attainable just because they went SAT optional.
Okay, Russ, I'm going to ask, this question has been presented a few times. I think now's a good time to ask it. And then maybe after this, we'll jump forward a little bit because time flies when we're sharing so much information. It's like, almost, over an hour. But okay, so here's the question. And a lot of people have asked it. So I hope that you've hung around to hear some comments about it. But how do you think the increase in the number of the 2020 graduates deferring will impact the number of spots available for 2021 students? And I don't think we have different opinions, but we can share what we think.
Yeah. So first off, I don't know that I believe all the hype, first off. And the original numbers, and I know, Debbie, you did a Facebook Live on this, so you could probably talk from a more intelligent place than I. But as I said, I have many individual students I work with now and have worked with last year. I also manage, as Debbie said, the concierge group, which is about 60 people in that group. And I'm not aware of anybody who actually is doing or taking a gap year.
Right.
So I think, the original numbers, you have to, again, always read the small type. Original numbers, I saw that 20% were considering a gap year. Then after, I don't even know where that number came from, but then 2 weeks later, I saw, no, really 12% of people are thinking about a gap year. Well, thinking about it means you check the box and said, yeah, you know why? And there could be a whole bunch of reasons for that. Also, colleges need the revenue. So they don't need, just because your child wants to take a gap year doesn't mean that they say, hey, you know what, no problem, we'll hold the spot for you. No, they're not going to do that. And that actually might help you if you're a 2021, because they may have more vacancies if they were lenient with the gap year. Because remember, the gap year doesn't necessarily guarantee them admission. It depends on what the terms of the gap year are. So I think that's kind of a little bit fake news, and I could be wrong. And there's probably colleges out there that are definitely going to be impacted. So we'll hear about that at some point, but I have not heard of any school that is, been tremendously impacted and their enrollment numbers impacted.
Yeah. I don't think we know for sure, but I absolutely agree with Russ. When I say I don't think we know for sure, I think it's just now that colleges are kind of really getting their enrollment numbers together, right? I mean, kids have only started going to school in the past few weeks. So that's when they can actually finalize their enrollment numbers for this season. And then there was, and maybe this is where this question is coming from, there was an article, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, with a very clickbaity headline that said, Harvard saw 20% of their freshmen defer. Okay, so that was a headline, but they did not break down that 20%. They did not say, was that international students that were included, which quite honestly was
huge.
Probably a bulk of that 20%.
Yes, that's a
that
huge,
20% was even valid, So, until somebody can break out all of the, fine detailed information, I don't think that we can make this big assumption that there's this huge wave of 2020s that have deferred that are going to impact the 2021s. And along that line is that, let's say in the worst case, there was this a big, number of 2020s that are now going to apply to 2021s, and the schools didn't fill their spots. So if the school didn't fill the spot and they have a lower 2020 class, then most likely they're going to take a higher 2021 class, because at the end of the day, they have to get the revenue back. So,
they can't afford empty seats. They can't.
Right.
And the other thing too is, Debbie, is because you brought it up before as well, but kind of on a quick note, but the international component is huge. And actually, if we look about it on a positive way, a lot of international students are going to be affected and impacted and not be able to apply and or attend
this coming season as well. I think they're not going to know if they can apply. Yeah,
exactly. So therefore, that could open up a lot more slots for domestic students. And just like what we saw off the wait list, more movement off the wait list this year than I've ever seen. And that's to fill spots.
Yep.
So I think you have to ask, like so many things we've talked about. I think you have to ask a specific school, because again, we're talking in general and nothing that we've seen, but obviously we can't be the gatekeepers of all information. But I would, you could definitely ask the colleges if they're being impacted by that as well. I would find it hard to believe that anybody is really being significantly impacted at this point. There's a lot of opportunistic people out there too that are in the gap world. And, you got to remember that, sometimes the marketing messages there are self-motivated.
So Laura asked a question about the Scott Galloway predictions and articles. And if people don't know who Scott Galloway is, I'm not going to go into detail. Look it up. And Laura's asking if we have an opinion. I will just say 2 seconds about that, Laura, but we actually wrote an article about it. That it could be a whole topic of another Facebook Live, but Scott Galloway predicted that a lot of schools are not going to survive. I'm not going to go into his data that he used, which a lot of people, have issues with, and they should. But I think the bottom line is that there are a good chance that a fair number of schools won't survive. The number that's being thrown around is 20%. Who those 20% might be, may not be who Scott Galloway identified. So that's why, I don't think it's fair to talk in detail about it. But it, kind of looking at a school's financial health,
Absolutely. Yep.
is going to be important this year more than ever. So, I will say it's a hot topic and it's something you shouldn't ignore. And we'll have more information about that, in the next few weeks.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be more the, not as popular private schools, more rural. You got to remember this, depending on what numbers you look at, there's between 3,700 and 4,000 colleges in the United States. But a majority of them have had financial issues and challenges for years and years and barely keep their doors open every day.
Right.
It's probably not the types of schools that a majority of the people on this call are applying to. And taking 20% of those, you wouldn't even feel the effect.
Right. The thing, though, that this issue brings up, and, again, this is like a whole nother topic, but I'll just throw this out, is I don't think the schools that most of the people probably on this, Facebook Live, their students are thinking of applying to are going to, go under. But there might be things that are changed at the school because of financial issues. So there might be a major that is deleted. We all know, we've been reading that sports have been, some teams have been cut. So that's the thing you might want to dig into. The school will probably be there, but how are they going to change to, meet their financial?
Well, that's very important. And by the way, as that should be part of, and that's, we've always discussed this, but now we discuss it even further as to making a final college decision. Like especially if your child requires or needs any kind of special services, whether it be academic special services, dietary special services, mental health special services, like those are the things that get cut, unfortunately, first, as well as the sports. as well as club activities, as well as travel abroad. Like a lot of those things do get impacted. So, Stanford, very well endowed, made some major changes. Lehigh, as you and I know and discussed, very well endowed, made some major changes. So it's in that instance, as far as change of services or change of offerings, it's not just the obscure schools or the schools that aren't as well known or popular. There's a lot of schools that are very well known with very large endowments that are unfortunately making some of those changes as well.
Yep. Okay, let's see. I might just skip ahead if that's okay, Russ.
Absolutely. I trust you, Deb. Whatever you want to go.
I think we've kind of hit on a lot of these. We were just summing it up. Maybe just quickly, some of the important dates, if you're not aware, some schools have already started rolling admission. Early action could be, October 15th. Early decision could be any one of these, the October 15th, November 1st, November 15th. So, you really have to know the specific dates. And I guess the other thing that we wanted to highlight is that there are other deadlines. So your child may be considering applying regular decision to a school, but the honors program might be an earlier, deadline, or a special scholarship might be an earlier deadline. Right. So I would scour the website and at whatever school your child is interested in, and make sure you have all the dates. And again, can't hurt. This is another call. You can just say, I want to confirm, is this the correct information that, you can call admissions and say, is this correct information they have on these dates?
Absolutely. Especially when it comes to merit and honors programs and special scholarships, you want to know that. The other thing too, Debbie, is I'll just make an analogy to this. I wouldn't just always look at, again, the lead page in the common application, just assume everything's legit and the way it is. It's not that it's wrong per se, but, students use mistakenly the dashboard of the Common App. And I can't tell you, I advise my students to never, ever, ever, ever use the dashboard. And despite that, it's a summation. It's easy to see. They pull it up. They go, no, I don't have any writing supplements. I'm done. No, you're not. So it's the data source that you're looking at. You have to go through the application line by line, answer every question, because sometimes based on your answer, additional essays, additional honors eligibility, do you want to be considered for XYZ scholarship pops up. So you really need to answer every question of the application to make sure you have a true picture of what is really available to you.
So, we love doing these Facebook Lives. We do them all year long on different topics. We actually... in the heat of COVID, when that all started, we did monthly coffee clutch, actually weekly. We did weekly coffee clutch sessions. So, we have no problem. We're all about sharing as much information as we have. But the things that we offer, whether, you see it here or if you go to the Road to College website, actually always come out of people like you guys or in the Facebook group asking for more help. So, this is something we thought this year, we're calling it, as Russ mentioned at the beginning, a senior sprint series, is for people who may not have started, early enough, and they're feeling a little nervous now. And what you got tonight is just, the tip of the iceberg, and it's a sample of the information that you need to know, but it's going to be not condensed in terms of, you're not going to get the information you need. It's just, now's the time that you need to really fit in everything that you should know about all the different aspects of the process. So we're doing a senior sprint series. It actually starts this Wednesday, and it goes through 4 sessions, all the important areas that you need to know about. But actually, what's great about this series is that each session's an hour and a half. And the reason why it's an hour and a half is that half of that time is based on, information you should know. And the other half is all of your personal Q&A questions. So you need to, come to that session with, we tried to answer a lot of questions here, but there were a lot that we just couldn't get to. And that's the type of stuff that you would get, all your questions answered at that type of a session. So that starts Wednesday. We already have people signed up for it because we did this session a week ago as well. So we extended the deadline. The enrollment was going to end tonight, but because we we actually were supposed to do this Facebook Live on Thursday. Actually, our schedules got messed up. But anyhow, we're extending this till tomorrow night because we didn't do this Facebook Live till tonight if you want to enroll. But if you want to sign up tonight, we are offering a special essay helper guide, which we've given out to some of the people who have signed up for essay help. And so that's actually a really great bonus. And early on, somebody asked, like, how do I get my child started with these essays? The essay helper guide is perfect for that. So anyhow, just a little incentive to kind of get you guys going. If anybody, wants to be part of these series, we'd love that you sign up tonight. You get the bonus. And if not, definitely you need to sign up by tomorrow night to be enrolled at all.
Yep. And again, it's going to be first 45 minutes of instruction, training, whatever you want to call it, and then 45 minutes of specific questions. And by the way, we're also limiting the number of people that can participate to, what did we say, 40 people, Deb, I believe?
Yep.
Yeah, because we want to keep it as close to one-on-one as possible. We want to make sure you get all the questions because obviously, I don't even know, how many people do we have on this one, Deb, right now?
Oh, there were over 200 people.
Yeah, so we obviously, there's no way to answer all those questions and that. And we obviously, if you're going to pay for something, want to make sure you get your full value out of it. So if it's something of interest, great. I guarantee you it'll be helpful. But we also then have some other stuff too.
Right. So the other thing that we also have in are different ways that you can get help in very affordable chunks. So this, we actually have been starting this since August. We have like a ton of people who have already gone through these services, but we've broken out different ways that your student can get help with the essay. It's again, all based on how much help they might need and kind of, how much that you can afford to pay. And again, I think these are all extremely reasonable, but we purposely kind of break them out so that they're even more reasonable. So if your child needs help with brainstorming, that's an option. If you just want the essay review, that's an option. If you want a little bit more, you want brainstorming and the essay review, again, another option. And the final one is, if you want to just make sure everything is grammatically right and there aren't any typos, that we'll review it for those minor errors as well.
Yeah, and the key point here too is, again, and I've actually seen a bunch of people ask this in the chat too. Can you help with essay services? Do you have anything to help with essays? So, this again was something that we created because we were asked to by the membership and by the people in the group, the subscribers too. So I have not seen anything out there that is this incredibly reasonably priced. But I also will make sure people know that obviously, it is going to be volume sensitive. And the closer we get to November 1st, the less availability that we're going to have for this service. So if you're interested, now's the time to kind of get the help that you need. And you can go, to Debbie's point, you can go to the website that she has there, roadtocollege.com/essay help. And that'll have the different packages and more detailed description of all that as well. So you understand what you get for it.
Right. And again, just a little incentive. If anybody wants to sign up tonight with any of these options, you'll get the special essay helper guide tonight. And then this question came up a lot about essays, if I purchase it tonight, how long do I have to use it? If you purchase it, we will make sure that you get, your time in. But as Russ said, and we talked about this before we got on the call, we actually have a lot of people who've already signed up. There's only so many hours in the day. And so at some point, probably, beginning of October-ish, we probably are going to have to just, close it because we might not have enough time to help make sure that we can help you in time for any, particular.
Yeah, we can't have 1,500 people coming in on November 20th to try to get it done by November 5th.
So Stacy's asking, and I actually don't have any information specifically here for that, but we have it. Stacy's asking, is there a list review consultation available?
Yes. So yeah, the same place. If you go to Road to College under resources, we have something called the College List Navigator. And that is a review of your college list. You fill out a short information packet for us. And you have a choice with that. You can either do it all virtually, as in, via email electronically, where you fill it out. I do an assessment. let you know, reach match safety, potential for financial aid, if you're on target given the goals that you want, and I create a Loom video and send that to you. Or there's another option where you actually can do a Zoom call with me for up to 30 minutes. And we can go back and forth, answer your questions, discuss things, maybe come up with some additional schools, that kind of stuff. So yes, that there is a service for that as well.
So, we talked about the senior sprint. We talked about the essay options. Stacy brought up, we just talked about, there's ways to get your list review. The point is, and if there's something that doesn't meet your needs of all of those, then let us know, because we'll figure something out. And that's kind of what's interesting to hear, is when people want a little bit of help that we haven't identified yet. We like to know that, and we'll come up with another way of helping you, and try and make it as easy and affordable as possible.
And by the way, we've tried not many, but we tried one or two things that didn't work also, and that happens. So we try to be responsive and create things that we think are going to meet the demand of the people asking. Some people say, "Oh, that'd be great if you had that," and then they sound all gung ho, and then we provide it, and then they don't do it, which that happens too. But I think regarding the essay helper options, the college list navigator options, you can't find what we're offering there for a better cost, and it definitely is a lot cheaper than obviously doing one-on-one counseling with anybody. And it's just a way to kind of, as we kind of say, dot the I's, cross the T's, make sure you're avoiding the big mistakes. It's a nice insurance policy to make sure that you're hopefully on track to achieve the results that you desire.
Yep. So I hope everybody got a lot of great information tonight. These are always automatically recorded. All the Facebook Lives are recorded. They are on the Road to College Facebook page itself in the video section, but we always post them. And, always, if you have questions, post them in the Paying for College 101 Facebook group, send an email my way. We usually, get to everybody's questions one way or another. And we just want to make sure that we can be available to help however you guys need it. So I wish everybody good luck.
Stay healthy and safe, everybody. And this too shall pass, hopefully successfully. But
right.
But you'll get through this application season and you'll be fine.
Okay, everybody. Good night.
Have a good night, everybody.